Drugs. Did I do any drugs? Chelsea Handler has this new... I thought Chelsea Handler, this big Netflix move, would be way bigger than this. Remember Chelsea Handler, giant show on E! One of the richest ladies. She quits her show. She says, I'm going to be coming to Netflix. I really assume this whole time she's going to be doing like a late night style show, like her panel style show on Netflix. But it turns out that's not what it is. It turns out it's just some like 4-episode documentary series called Chelsea Does. And each episode she tackles a new thing. Very cringe, by the way. Her personality, you know what Chelsea Handler? Chelsea Handler is a person who hasn't been like taken down by the internet. This is like a person who doesn't read negative comments about her. Like she doesn't understand. She's never been humbled. She's like ultra cringe in this new series. But she did an episode called Chelsea. It was episode 4 called Chelsea Does Drugs. And it was pretty fucking badass. The whole episode is her talking to her friends about how she does Molly, how she smokes weed, how she does all this. They all get high. They do ayahuasca. Like they show the entire ayahuasca ceremony on it. It was pretty fucking badass. And very pro-drug, which is a crazy move because most of Chelsea Handler's fans are like middle-aged Ellen moms. And for her to do this whole pro-drug episode, talking about how she does cocaine, she does Adderall on this show, she does this all live. Pretty fucking badass and a great move in the right direction for drugs. So I would recommend that episode, but very cringe otherwise. Send in your drugs. I've been fucking around with a lot of different drugs. I talked about on the last show that I experimented with Nitrous, the whippets stuff, where you get an actual whipped cream canister like the kind they use at Starbucks. You get the little N2O chargers, and you put the N2O charger in the whipped cream canister, and then you fill up a balloon with the gas, and then you take a balloon. Here, I'll show you. Now, you might think this is something like only a complete scumbag would do. Maybe you're right, but I urge everyone to try this because a really interesting thing happens. I wish I had some. If somebody wants to buy me N2O chargers, I'll do these on the show. N2O whipped cream chargers. If somebody wants to send some in, I'll do a couple of these on the show to show you because it's real interesting what happens. And I'm trying to explore what happens during this. Now, before you start thinking this is the same thing as huffing paint and huffing gas, I need you to know you're wrong, okay? I'm a civilized man. I would never huff paint. I would never do meth. I would never do these junky things. But from everything I read, this is a completely harmless thing to do. 100% harmless, no side effects. The only time people have been hurt is when, again, they have abused this thing and they're doing it on top of, you know, booze or they're going nuts. But if you do whippets in nitrous oxide the way it's intended, you will not be harmed at all. It's much safer than drinking one drink. Okay? So you need to know that. I think there's been a lot of misinformation. You know, you cannot trust your local news because this is what you heard, you know, in the early 2000s. Nitrous oxide, a new drug amongst teens, very dangerous, people dying. They do that with every new drug. It's horseshit. The only time people die from drugs is when they go nuts. These are the same people who die from booze. Here's all you need to know. Hundreds of thousands of people die from alcohol every year. You wouldn't call me crazy for drinking. But yet we hear a couple people die from drug deaths and you go, holy fuck, to do drugs would be stupid. Well, you don't think that way about alcohol. So let's talk about Nitrous because it's very interesting. And I want people to try it because I'm trying to figure out what's actually happening in this little trip. So what you do is you fill up a balloon and I'll show you. I have very weak lungs. I can really not. I felt like when I was a kid, I could blow up a balloon, Blowing up a balloon to this size like hurts the inside of my cheeks. But anyway, you'll fill up the balloon with the nitrous, and it gets about this big. And then what you'll want to do is you'll kind of want to go like this. A couple times. Or as many times as you could do. Breathing the nitrous into the balloon and then back into your lungs. And then all of a sudden you'll go, whoa! And you'll almost disconnect from your body for a second. And I'm trying to figure out what this feeling is. It's this really thick pressure. I tend to go like this. I tend to put my arms in the air every time. And go, oh. And it's this weird place that it takes you to. I'm trying to figure out what happens in this place. As far as your physical body, touching yourself doesn't even feel good. None of it. You don't really think about your physical body. You get a ringing in your ears. You get a kind of a wobble. But I'm trying to figure out what happens in this little trip. So I would love to do some live on the air. If anyone wants to order me N2O chargers, I'll do it. And if anyone has any more detailed information on what's going on in this trip, let me know. For those of you who don't know, I like to experiment with drugs and see where they take you. And I would like to do more of that kind of stuff. So send in your drugs. Email me, mike@redbarradio.net. I'll tell you how to do that. And if you're the cops, this is all a big joke. Just a joke. Mark Maron. It's a dissociative. Yeah. I've been saying I find that word dissociative so funny. And I've been saying to my wife, Jules, I go, do you mind if I do a dissociative really quick? And then I'll do a balloon. But I've been calling it, every time I do it, I call it a dissociative for fun. Somebody says drug talk is my favorite part of the bar. I feel bad for people who have been brainwashed by the anti-drug people. And when they hear people talk about drugs, they get this scummy feeling in their mind. Or maybe they remember somebody that they knew from school or childhood who did drugs that was a scumbag. Because here's what it is. People who do drugs aren't all scumbags, but all scumbags do drugs. So every negative drug story you've ever heard is from some scumbag who did drugs, and that's what you're remembering. But it doesn't mean anything. Again, think about alcohol. Here's some info on nitrous. Yeah. Somebody says, yeah, I'm pretty into drug talk right now. Good. I love drug talk. I could listen to people talk about drugs. I find drugs to be fascinating, and I think that they should be encouraged. I think they should be done responsibly. When you do drugs, leave the alcohol out of it until you understand exactly how the drug works. Almost everybody who does drugs seems to think they should be doing them while wasted. I can't imagine why you would think that's a good idea. First of all, you're not really understanding what's happening with the drugs, and you're entering a dangerous state there. So leave the alcohol out of it until you've completely figured out what the drug does and how to, wade through those waters. And I want to do a lot more experimenting. The problem is, at 33, drugs does take a week out of my life. Any hard drug, really, you think it doesn't, but it does. Even MDMA, it's a full day of recovery for me usually with MDMA. And then really I'm kind of off my game all week. And when you have a talk radio show, it's kind of sucks to do that. But yeah, somebody says most drug addicts have terrible lives even if they never took drugs. Yeah. Don't look at drug users as drug addicts. See, this is the problem. We've been brainwashed into thinking if you use drugs, you're a druggie. You're a bad. But again, people can use alcohol and they're not alcoholics. Many of you, most people use alcohol, and we consider them to be fine members of society. It's the same exact goddamn thing. So I really want to push that. And yeah, somebody mentions again, drugs are only bad if you have an addictive personality, and then even there, not all drugs, yeah. Again, I've tried almost all the drugs. I haven't done injectable heroin. I haven't even done heroin, I don't think, but I've done similar opiates. And I've never done meth. I'm never going to do a drug that is dirty, you know. But the other ones I will do. And then you hear people talk about drugs. They really have no idea. I was listening to Anthony Cumia's show, and him and Luis J. Gomez were talking about how they think that in the 80s, you know how you hear these stories about how in the 80s all these comedians and comedy club owners all did coke? Well, they were talking about like that's insane, and that they doubt that really happened because how could you possibly do coke and run a comedy club? Let me tell you something. It's very fucking easy. Cocaine is the most nothing drug you'll ever do. Cocaine really has probably the worst rap out of any drug. You can do cocaine and really, you don't even feel fucked up. It's so weird. You feel way more fucked up when you have a cold or a flu than you ever would on cocaine. I'm really sick of people who haven't tried drugs talking about how cocaine is nuts. Everyone, I dare you to go try cocaine. You'll be like, this is it? It does nothing. I mean, cocaine is like, yeah, it's like the most mild drug you could ever imagine. Go try it. You know, really. This is all propaganda. But I love the direction things are going, and people are really starting to let drugs come into the mainstream. And you should. Anybody who looks down on drugs, it's like, do you look down at food? Do you understand? If you could understand the concept of, I love barbecue food. I love going and getting a great slab of ribs. It pleases. You don't need ribs. Why not just eat fucking bread all day? You eat foods that are delicious because it's giving you a feeling that's great, even for a very short time. So if you could understand the concept of eating a burger because it tastes great, then you should be able to understand the concept of doing drugs. A lot of people go, why would I want to do drugs why would I want to do cocaine, to feel? Well, why would you want to eat a burger? It tastes delicious for what? 4 minutes, and then it's over. And then you gain weight, and then it adds to, health problems. So if you understand the concept of eating because it's delicious, and you understand the concept of coming, talk about that. I mean, to not get drugs, but understand coming. You understand that you'll sit there and jack off every day for what? A 5-second pleasure spurt? So if you understand the concept of jacking yourself off so that you could come, all that work, every single day of your life, you're a drug addict. You do drugs. You understand drugs. If you understand coming, you get drugs. If you drink coffee, you're into drugs. Not saying coffee is a drug. I'm saying it's changing the way you feel. So yeah, anybody who enjoys an orgasm would enjoy drugs. It's just this weird, it's almost the same way as how sex was looked at in the 1950s. Something you shouldn't talk about. Something you shouldn't. It's still looked at that by some people, but that was a bunch of horse shit. And you'll find the same with drugs. Cameron says heroin gets a bad rep. I know people who have a good full-time job and do opiates of all sorts, but they control themselves. That, unfortunately, is true. Not unfortunately. See, we look at it as such a bad thing when it's really not. We got to get that out of our heads. We've done it with weed. Weed was looked at as a scumbum's drug, and now you're respecting it. But I also do keep hearing a lot of people say stuff like, I can't do weed brownies. Ooh, I can't do it. I go to a bad place. But like an overwhelming amount of people who say that. And I really think those people have a lot of fucking problems. I even heard Willie Nelson was on Chelsea Handler's drug show, and she was interviewing him on his tour bus. And Willie Nelson is supposedly this Snoop Dogg type of guy. Willie Nelson don't even smoke that much weed. I hate to break it to you. She had a question for him. She goes, "Are you always high when you perform?" And he's like, no, not really. Something like that. And also he said he can't do edibles and that he's only tried LSD once and it was too strong for him and he didn't like it. I don't like those people. I don't like those people who try drugs once and they decide that it's not for them. I feel like you're missing out on a big portion of life and you're too scared. But it bothers me that I don't like these guys, like Doug Benson too. He smokes all this weed and then it's like, have you ever done acid? No, I wouldn't touch that. It's like, you should be doing all of it if you're into... And anyway, that's my personal opinion. I'm very into it. I would like to try more. Get it in my hands. That's all I'm saying. Let's watch this. Let's move on from drug talk. I love drug talk, though. I'm with you. And let's do some nitrous balloons on the show. The great thing about the nitrous balloons is that it only lasts about a full minute, with the really intense part of the high being 15 seconds. But if somebody could send me those chargers, those N2O chargers, you could buy them on Amazon. You could buy them a lot of places. Hook me up with some of those. I'll do them on the show.